how you doing? We missed the welcome, we missed the class. My family's sick. All four of us have been sick. So I zipped in after the welcome started. I'll probably zip in afterwards. If you have any complaints, I direct you to David Ross Nelson. He was happy to take them. He's good at it. So it's good to be here this morning, but like I said, all of the kids, Rosie's sick, and I've been sick too. So I bring greetings from the church that meets at the Atchley house. So you can see behind me, we're doing something new again. We're starting something new. This is the book of Nehemiah. This is a book in the Old Testament. This is a book that maybe you haven't worked through before. I don't know. This is a story of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. And this series is coming right at the tail end of a whole theme we've been doing of Harbour and Horizon. So Harbour being the place where you come to get refreshment, healing, restoration, build community, get trained, prepare yourself, plan, and then you go out into the horizon. So we've done Sabbath, we've done in Mark's Gospel, in the boat with Jesus, very early on. We've done the spiritual gifts and how to use them. We've done the series on the home as a place where you belong, a place where you're challenged, a place where you can come and be yourself. So we've been seeing that this church is meant to be, and I believe is, a safe place, a place for that healing. But also a place where you get trained and prepared and go out into the wider world. So Nehemiah is a story much like all of this. And it'll be the last story in our Harbour theme. When daylight savings hits in late September, I think, that's when we'll switch gears into the horizon side of this Harbour and Horizon. Because ChatGPT once told me this, the wisdom from ChatGPT. It said that a harbour that never launches ships has failed. A harbour that never launches a ship has failed. So if you come here and you never get launched out again, we have failed. We have failed you, we have failed God. This church does not exist just to be a stronghold against which the world can never touch. But in fact, this church is a staging area, a staging ground, a preparation place for you to go out into your community. Because you have people to reach, you have friends, colleagues, you have family, you have people you need to serve. You have skills that God gave you that He wants you to use. You have yourself a lot of growing to do. That's what this church is meant to be and to serve God in this way. That's what Nehemiah is about in a variety of ways, as we'll see over the next few weeks. We'll see that this book is supposed to kind of set the stage. It's about 100 years after the Jews went into exile in Babylon because of their idolatry, because of their meanness, their cruelty to each other, their abandonment of God. So it's around the 6th century BC. Persia is taking control from Babylon and is allowing God's people to return home, back to Judah. And this is we found this out in history. This is kind of a pivotal world history event. If you were captured by Babylon, what they would do to you is they would take the best. They'd take the leaders, they'd take the rich, they'd take the smartest people, and they would take them back to Babylon. Probably for two reasons. One of them is so that they could control you. The other reason is so that they could actually benefit from your skills. So if you've read the book of Daniel, that's that story. The brightest, the youngest, the best. Kind of like taking the Amens over here. We take them to rob America. But then when Persia takes over, they have a different tactic. What they would do is they'd maybe it's almost like currying favor, or it's having an appearance of being a little bit more generous. They would allow you to go home. And they would control you from afar. They'd set up a government that made sure it worked with the Persian government. And as the book of Nehemiah opens, that return has begun. The Jews are going back to Jerusalem, to Judah. They're being allowed to return home or to stay. And Nehemiah, he's kind of one of these cultural elites, as we'll find out. And he meets somebody who's just done that, who's just gone to Jerusalem and is coming back to talk at back in Persia. So Nehemiah chapter 1. There's nothing on the screen behind me but that, so you have to listen to my dulcet tones. Nehemiah 1, 1-4. The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. Nehemiah chapter 1. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnants that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. And when I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. Why would he do that, you know? If you know a little bit about the background for Nehemiah, as far as we know, he's actually never been to Jerusalem. His family probably grew up for generations in Persia and Babylon. He lives and works in Susa, which is kind of like the royal or the administrative capital of Persia. So they've spent ages away from Jerusalem. So if he's never been there, why would he weep? Why would he cry? Now, many of us in this room have come from a different place. Most of us, actually, I think. Even a different city in New Zealand, but a different country, most of us. We've got the Fishers from South Africa. We've got the Quaimanis from Solomon Islands. We've got Melinda from the USA. We've got Suze from Sweden, which is great alliteration there, Suze. Good job. And so even though this is home for us, there's a part of you that never forgets. There's a part of you that always remembers. There's a part of you that always kind of looks back and thinks about your people, your background, your country, where you came from. Even perhaps if you've spent decades away. I was just on Google a month ago, and I was just clicked on the bar, and the first thing that came up, one of the top trending searches said Perth weather. I'm from Perth. The weather is not something to talk about in Perth. It's pretty much blue skies and lack of rain every day. But for it to be a search trending, I was like, my heart started fluttering. You know, what's going on? There'd been a storm through the region of where I was from. So even though I've been here 11 years, my mind's still, your heart's still. And so it's likely that for Nehemiah, his heart still is in his home country. He's heard the stories, he's met the people. This is where, and not only that, this is God's temple we're talking about. This is God's city. These are God's people. So there's many reasons why he should care. He's a faithful Jewish, God-believing person. So when he hears the story about Jerusalem, of course, he sits down, he weeps, he mourns, it says. He fasts, he prays for Jerusalem. Like in that psalm we read before. And I'll summarize what he says. He says, this is what we deserve. We turned our back on you, God. We turned our back on your laws. We turned our back on your covenant. We acted wickedly. We got what we deserved. So our gates are burned with fire and our people are overrun. But Lord, please don't forget, you made a promise to us. And I'll quote verses 8 and 9. You said, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there, and I will bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. And then right at the end of this prayer, Nehemiah says something shocking. He says, please, Lord, give your servant success by granting him favor in the presence of this man. What's shocking about that, you may not know yet, but Nehemiah has a job. And his job is to be cupbearer to the king of Persia. Nehemiah is not a typical, he's not some great missionary or some amazing spiritual leader. He's not a preacher. He's not He's not trained in theology of some kind. He's not your typical kind of a Bible hero. Nehemiah is, for all intents and purposes, he's a civil servant. He's a public servant. He works in administration. He drinks poison, basically. He's a cupbearer. He checks for poison in the king's cup. He serves in the palace. He's an ear for listening, a counselor in times of need. And he's worked hard. To have that position is a position of trust. If you were royalty and you needed somebody to be your first line of protection, you would choose somebody you trust. You wouldn't just choose any Joe Bloggs, you know? And so he's worked hard to get to this position. But he's not your typical kind of a biblical hero. And he's asking God to use him anyway. He's asking God to use him to bend the ear of the king, to try to work God's will into this situation. He's asking God to pick him and use his gift, even though he's not your typical kind of a hero. And so Nehemiah prays that God would give him opportunity, and you know what? That's exactly what God does. In chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, cupbearer, when wine was brought, I took the wine and I gave it to the king. I had not been sad in the presence of the king before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad? You're not ill, like Rosie and Ambrose and Nellie. This can be nothing but sadness of heart. Why is your face sad in my presence? And Nehemiah says, I was very much afraid. I was terrified. You should be careful what you pray for, because God might just do it. And he's drawn the king's attention, and his life is in danger. One of my favorite Christian thinkers, Tim Keller, he describes this moment as being in the palace with the king. He says that Nehemiah's worked hard to be into this position, right? He's risked his life. He tests for poison. He's risked his life. He's worked life and limb. And now to stand before the king and to try to bend things towards God's will could get him killed. He's risking a lot for this. Pagan kings do not take kindly to when you step in their presence and you ruin their day. They tend to get a little bit executionary. So Nehemiah, you would think if you were in his position, you know, the gates are broken down. God's city's in ruins. But do I have to get involved? Does it really have to be me? Can't I just stay out of the way? You know, I've worked hard to be in this position. I have a family. I have people who care for me. I have a job to do. Why can't I just focus on that? My family, my career. Why can't I just go on holiday a few times a year maybe? Maybe I can say a prayer of thanks and that'll do it. You know, why can't I just rest on this? Isn't that enough for you, God? And Tim Keller says, your ears need to prick up at a time like this in the scriptures. And I'll quote him. He says, unless you use your clout, your mana, your reputation, your skill, unless you use your clout, your credentials, and your money in service to the people outside of the palace is a prison. You may think you have been given little because you are always striving for more. But you have been given much, and God has called you to put it into practice. It's natural to root your identity in your position in the palace, to rest your security in the fact that you have a certain measure of control over the variables in your life. It's natural to find your significance in having clout in certain circles, but if you are unwilling to risk your life in the palace for your neighbor, the palace owns you. The palace owns you. This story is not just about a bunch of people coming back to Jerusalem. This story is not just about a return from exile. This story is about you, and it's about me, and it's about us. Each one of us has worked hard to be where we are. Each one of us has sometimes moved entire countries to be here. Each one of us has a story and a journey. Each one of us has worked tooth and nail. And so it's easy to make excuses. It's easy for us to say, if someone else will do it, whatever needs to be done for you, God, someone will step in, but not me. You know, God, can't I just say my prayer of thanks? Can I just go to my dinner table at night and say a prayer and then go to bed? Maybe go to church once in a while. Isn't that enough? But unless you're willing to risk your place in the palace, unless you're willing to risk your place in your workplace, in your family, among your friends, or at your school, then those things own you, not God. Those own you. Those are more important to you than God is, if you're unwilling to risk yourself. If your position and your comfort take control and have precedence over God, that's what owns you, not God. That means that maybe there's somebody you've been meaning to speak to. Maybe there's somebody in your life who you've just had on your heart that they need to hear this message, or they need to hear some hope, or they need to be challenged. And maybe it's time to step up. Maybe there's something going on that you know about that's wrong. That's not God-honoring. That's not righteous. That doesn't make the world a better place. And maybe you're in the position where you need to risk yourself to speak up. Maybe you feel like you have gifts that could be used for service for God and His kingdom and this world, for your neighbor, and you're afraid. Maybe you need to risk it. Maybe you haven't stepped into a position with God. Maybe you haven't put on Christ. Maybe you haven't risked it all. Risked it with your family. Risked it with this world, with your job. Maybe you need to step up. Maybe God is calling you today. Whatever it is going on in your life, you have influence. You have some measure of control, and God is calling you to use it in service to Him, to His kingdom, to this world. And it's risky. Maybe it is. Maybe it's going to cost you. Maybe it cost Jesus to go onto the cross. Maybe it cost Daniel to stand against the authorities in his time and to bow to God instead of to Nebuchadnezzar. It's going to cost Nehemiah. Thank you, Siri. You know, it's not the amen I was looking for, but I'll take it. So Nehemiah finds himself in front of the king of Persia, and he finds himself in a risky position, and he knows it's going to cost him if he steps forward. But he clearly cares about Jerusalem. Serving the king of Persia, he cares about God and God's people. Kings don't take kindly to getting in their way. He might get killed. He might be destroyed. And so he has a choice. Will he give in to this pressure? Will he give up on what he believes in? Or will he risk it all? Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 2 to 4. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad for the city where my ancestors are buried, and it's in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire? Why shouldn't I be? Even in front of a king, I will speak the truth. My heart is broken, and I'm going to risk it. And then the king said to Nehemiah, what is it you want? And so begins our journey with Nehemiah. Nehemiah isn't killed in the throne room of Persia. He's going to pick up and go. He's going to go from Susa, the capital, all the way to Jerusalem. He's going to take a whole bunch of supplies. He's going to meet people on the way. He's going to meet people when he gets there. And he's going to rise them up. He's going to rouse them. He's going to say, we have work to do. We've got to put our hands to this work. We need to change this place. He's going to face resistance and criticism. His life is going to be threatened multiple times. His neighbors' lives are going to be threatened multiple times. But he knows what he needs to do. He's going home. And likewise, we are going to be tempted to cower in our holy huddle. We're going to be tempted to treat this church building like a stronghold, to treat it like it's an impenetrable fortress that nobody's allowed to touch. But we need to be convicted by the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah didn't just use his position to benefit himself. He used his position to benefit God. He used the clout, the reputation, the influence, the power he had to do great things for God and his kingdom, even though it might cost him everything. He didn't wait for somebody else to do it. He didn't wait for some evangelist or some preacher or some missionary. He didn't wait for somebody who earned more money than him. He knew that the job could be done and he could do it, and God had gifted him. So he prayed to be used. And God answers prayers like that. So watch out. We all have work to do. We all have people to help. I can't help all the people you can. You can't help all the people I can. We all have a certain measure of influence and power and control. And we are being called to put it into play, to use it for God and his kingdom. So my prayer today is that we can learn from Nehemiah. We can take this challenge. We can accept what God is calling us to do, and we can grow together. Let's pray. Dear God in heaven,